Hello, welcome to the Emotionally Focused Therapy Podcast with your hosts, EFT trainer Michael Barnett and EFT supervisor Michael Preston. Together, we will be exploring the art, heart, and science of EFT. We're excited to bring you this first season of the EFT podcast Foundations, where Michael and Michael will be breaking down the fundamental elements of EFT.
Welcome back to the Emotionally Focused Therapy Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Michael Preston, along with co-host Michael Barnett. How you doing, buddy?
I am awesome. Happy to be here once again, as always. How are you?
Very good. Very good. I'm looking forward to, we've got core skills coming up next week, and I know you've got a core skills at the end of this month as well. Are you all finishing up this round, or are you just getting started?
No, we are moving into Core Skills Module 4, so we'll be going into pursuer softening, and we have 2 more months, and then we will wrap up the module with a weekend of showing videos and just serial supervision and have everybody really uplift each other through that process.
Yeah.
We're coming to a close.
That's great. I just want to encourage, not a lot of communities and centers around the world are still doing Core Skills 5.
I know.
And that's, each center has to make the choices that they can with the participants that they can. But if you're attending a Core Skills that offers Core Skills 5, I really want to encourage people to go to it. We held one last year in Atlanta, and I had the incredible privilege of running that with EFT supervisor there, Jenna, who has just become like my work wife. That we spend a lot of time talking and emailing, and she's just become a dear friend of mine, as well as a really respected colleague. And we ran Core Skills 5 together, and the participants came over the weekend, and we watched tape all weekend. And one of the things that kept coming from the participants is that this was the most meaningful part of our training.
Sure.
To come together and watch video and just listen to the feedback they got about all the wins and the things they're doing really well. And then if open to it, some handholds to make some adjustments. It was really profound for some people, right? Where they said this really was a very powerful part of the learning process to bring the work. And it even pushed people into like, okay, I've got to get that recording, right? I've got to start looking at this work. But then to watch your recording for the first time in a safe environment with people that are also watching the recording for the first time. It's just, there's something special about it. So I'm just going to make a plug real quick for all the Core Skills 5. Anyone running Core Skills 5 up there, I want you all to consider to go to the Core Skills 5. It's really important.
I have been implementing it for over a dozen years, and oftentimes felt like I was swimming upstream because some other folks thought it might be a bit unpopular, but the reality is it gave us a lot more time for people to really sink their teeth into the model for the first 4 modules. And then, as you're mentioning, to go through what essentially feels like a graduate school cohort. Skills, but then take this big leap off the cliff to expose yourself and show your work. And then you have this incredible support system who you've logged so many miles with at this point in time to be right in it, walking alongside you. And the way I've described it is I feel like the externship offers a foundation. And then Core Skills, we're starting to build the bricks for the house. And that Core Skills 5 is almost like the mortar, because we get to really start addressing the complexity of the cases that everybody has in their real caseloads, rather than simply the kinds of vignettes that we often use for doing role plays that are tamer. They're more garden variety, but the reality is they're awesome for teaching people the fundamentals of how to do EFT, but they're not representative or reflective of our real practices. And so when you see everybody's clips, right, with much more complex therapy,
way more complex,
and the teaching that comes out of a full 2 days of supervision, looking at those specific areas, trauma, addiction, trails, et cetera, right? It just comes alive in a new way. So I've also heard people say that was my favorite model. It was super consolidating, felt so much support from people. It was kind of beyond what I expected. It's a beautiful, beautiful experience, and I think a very integrating experience for people. So thank you for the plug.
There's the plug,
near and dear to my heart for a long time. And
go to Core Skills 5.
Yes.
Find a Core Skills that has Core Skills 5.
It's fun.
And participate in it. That's your plug for the day. But let's go ahead and get started so we can keep moving this episode along and not keep everyone around for too long. Today, we're going to be talking about, and the next episode will break down this a little bit further in stage 2, but we're looking today at the EFT Tango as it pertains to stage 1 work. And that's really an important distinguisher because there's a little bit nuanced difference in what we're doing in stage 2, but we're still using the Tango. So we're going to break down stage 1 and stage 2 in our next 2 episodes about what we're doing, what's the aim, and really how the Tango is shaped for stage 1 and how the Tango helps us meet our goals for stage 1. And so we talked a little bit about, we gave a little bit of an overview of the Tango as a whole, but today we're going to start our conversation with a question for you, Michael, which is how does the Tango in stage 1 help the therapist begin to meet the goals of de-escalation, recognizing their cycle, these goals and these working spots in stage 1?
Yeah.
How does that work with the Tango?
Well, that is a great starting question. And almost everything we'll be talking about could be thought about like those nesting dolls, right?
Oh, of course.
Going broad stroke.
Right.
And so even as you mentioned the goal being de-escalation, I think there's more in that than you would think of at first blush. And the reason I say that is when we think about how the Tango ultimately gets tailored to fit the model, the stage that we're working in within our model, it fits it based on what the goal of that stage is. So to start at that place, we're thinking about, so what is de-escalation? And even to a broader question is, how does the EFT therapist see the problem, right, in conflict between significant others? And it's very unique. It's not what most people think. Various other couples therapies have very specific ones that I think are much more obvious, solving a problem, right? Communication styles, communication protocols, or quid pro quo, balancing needs.
I statements.
Statements.
Learning to use I statements.
What's your love language?
Well, I think about the therapy that I learned, which was the awareness wheel, right? Can you get on the awareness wheel? I don't know. You probably remember the awareness wheel from somewhere along in your career, but like just doing this thing and doing this thing. It's very like just do the thing.
Right. And so the beautiful thing about what we're talking about that is a real departure from a lot of previous couples therapies and certainly individual therapy is we start with a framework of looking at the relationship as a whole. And within that relationship are the people that comprise that relationship. And if I said that differently, we're looking at the system. So we're really interested in understanding the system. And this is where Sue did something really, really unique that we just may take for granted might be too strong. But she was aware at the time that the systems therapists were kind of putting a stake in the ground and saying, you know what, if you just change the way the system moves and the way the elements relate in the system, then we reframe the whole system and voila, we're done. And none of that messy emotional stuff, that's irrelevant. And then you had the experiential therapists who said it's all about emotional experience. And we're going to take people deeply into that. And the system's somewhat irrelevant. The change is going to happen from engaging with your emotional world. And she said, you know what? Couples have co-created a dynamic, unwittingly, but they've co-created a dynamic when they start talking about very, very sensitive things that end up turning that conversation into a conflict. And it creates massive amounts of disconnection. So she said, if you want to connect that with attachment theory, that invisible sinew, that lifeline of connection is under threat. And the amygdala is going bananas, sending danger signals. And she said, we can't really separate out the system from people's internal experiential emotional process. So she was essentially saying this conflict pattern is driven by emotion, specifically emotion that is connected to people's attachment experience. So she said it's a both and. And so we're looking at the way the system organizes the conflict. And there's this beautiful image from Burning Man that lots and lots of us see in trainings. It's that huge wired sculpture with these two people whose they're back to back and their heads are in their hands and they clearly look like they're in an immense amount of distress. And within that wire sculpture, you see these two essentially infants who are reaching through the wire, hands touching, and you see the longing. So that you see the attachment distress and the attachment longing. And what we've done in our trainings is we have superimposed an image of the cycle as a transparency. And we say, we see all of this coming forward, and our job is to elicit the system. So the Tango is our way, the therapist's process of beginning to explore how people co-create this thing that has comprised the conflict experience in their relationship. So it's both partners or all partners, maybe more than two. And what is it that comprises this particular dynamic that essentially blocks connection and hijacks the relationship.
So I'll say, as you're saying this, what's really coming alive for me is the tango is almost impossible if I'm not starting from a place internally of there's a meaningful and reasonable reason behind the unreasonable thing happening between this couple.
Right.
I have to believe that, or I'm not going to lean into what the tango asks me to lean into about each person and each person's experience in this argument, this dance they're getting into. If I don't truly believe that there's something important happening here, that if I don't see the wire and the people within the wire, right, then it's going to be very difficult to do the tango, because I'm going to lean in more with judgment and, oh, that's the spot you need to fix, just change that.
That's
But
right.
just what I hear you saying is there's that belief behind it. There's a meaningful and reasonable reason behind what we're seeing. And it's kind of our job, and we use the tango to suss that out.
And what you're naming right here is in seeing de-escalation as the goal and seeing the problem as there's been this self-reinforcing dynamic that's really toxic to connection that both people co-created. We're non-pathologizing the people in the relationship immediately, because we're saying this happens naturally, and that's not to minimize the impact. So the tango is our way of, one, eliciting what is that system? What is that dynamic that people have co-created? And of course, significant others have exponentially more impact on one another than just about anybody in the entire world will have on each partner. So we're starting to look in a really human way. What is the distress that often gets really not expressed? Oftentimes in couple conflict, really what you see on the surface is trigger reaction, trigger reaction, trigger reaction, trigger reaction, and either no ability or no interest or no awareness. There's a very, very vast and tender world that gets activated on the inside for both people, and it is unspoken. So once we start bringing that alive, it starts humanizing each person to the other person, and they start seeing that there are these unspoken aspects of what they each experience that are very vulnerable and often have a lot of attachment intent, meaning it's often feeling that this person who this conflict may make me feel like I don't matter to, or I'm not heard by. That person is so intensely important to me. That feeling like I don't matter to that person, my significant other, or I'm not listened to or understood by that person, it is overwhelming, and in no small part because this person is my person.
Right.
Person is my significant other. And so we are trying to elicit and unfold and access and help people make sense of all of that. And then rather than reacting from what we now know through attachment theory as attachment strategies, which Bowlby would say they're not good or bad, he just said they're ineffective or they're effective. But insecure strategies are ineffective because unintentionally they create reactivity and they send unintentionally threat signals. So we help people move into the actual core emotional experience, which we will talk about more, and be able to lean into one another and share that directly with each other from a vulnerable place. And what we know is that's going to intensely heighten the opportunities and chances that the partner is going to be pulled toward the person expressing themselves in that moment, rather than shutting down or fighting them, right? And then what we are doing is taking this moment where we see the problem as systemic, we see the problem as a dynamic, that they touch into a certain emotion, express it ineffectively, it creates disconnection. We help people express it directly. And that very same emotional experience we use as a moment for connection.
And the EFT therapist is going to see that dynamic as predictable.
Exactly.
It's going to be, this is what happens. And we use the predictability of it to kind of overlay that on their relationship to begin to help the couple discover that, oh, this thing is predictable. We can start to see that. I like to say the topic may change, but the dance stays the same.
Right. That's right.
And we help people see that they can also overlay this onto different topics and different ways they try to approach a challenging topic, be it family, be it vacation, be it kids, be it finance, be it sex. But generally speaking, we're not saying that every move is always the same.
Yes.
But generally speaking, there's a general way they move. And in stage one, using the tango, we're really helping bring the couple's attention to that part of it, at least right in the very beginning. We really need couples to see that, right?
Right. And it's the EFT therapist way of directing the therapy process to bring that alive in a way that is both understandable and emotionally alive so people embody it, and then create a different experience where they hold that together. So I had the guy say as I was checking in with him in an assessment, and he was saying, it's like me and my husband have the exact same fight where we're planning to plant fescue in our backyard or considering having a child. You are brilliant, my friend. That's exactly it. So it's kind of like teach a person, what is it? You give a person a fish and they'll eat
That's
for a
right.
day, but teach a person to fish and understand in this case, right? Like you were saying, you can superimpose topic du jour,
Hmm.
but the pattern, the dynamic is the same, and it is predictable, and it keeps repeating itself over and over. And we ultimately help people not only understand that cognitively, which is important, but it's not enough. We help them actually experience the emotional embodied reality of these awful narratives that get generated in a moment where the disconnection with your significant other happens.
Yeah.
Right? We
So
bring that alive. And the
that's
tango helps
huge.
us do that, right? That's what the tango does.
That's what the tango does. So let me just I'm gonna jump to the end
Yeah,
and then we kind of work back through it, because what you said is it's not enough for couples to just know it,
right.
right? And so in the beginning, where couples they don't know it, they don't realize it, they don't see that dance so clearly. They come in thinking, the partner's a problem and whatnot. And the end, kind of the de-escalation goal, we really want them to see. I think you've said it to me many times. I say it all the time, which is they come in and the cycle has them, and at stage 1, we want them to have the cycle, right? And that's really a de-escalated couple. They have their cycle. They're able to grab hold of it. But it's not enough just to be able to see the data points and understand, oh, when I do this, they did that, right?
Right. Right.
If that was it, it would be a purely cognitive model. So that's where we're trying to take people to, where they have their cycle, but that requires a certain amount of work, which is where I'd like to lean in at this moment.
Let's lean.
Because we use the tango in stage 1 in a specific way and with a specific aim to help them get a hold of the cycle. And when you say it's not enough to know it, to cognitively understand this thing, it has to be an emotionally engaged process. So let's kind of walk through a little bit about the tango, going through the moves in stage 1 as we use them to help them begin to see and kind of experience that emotional process so that they can reach de-escalation.
Great. That's
Okay.
awesome. That's awesome. So, one of the things, for whatever reason, I'm just having an association with a couple I worked with early on. And as I was meeting them in an assessment, I kind of said, well, what brings you in? Help me understand where you are, where you're stuck. And they essentially said, actually, I don't know. But what happens can happen at any time. We could be in the kitchen peeling potatoes, and the next thing we know is it's World War III. So that tells me there's something that feels really bad.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how we co-create it. It's not organized at all. We don't really have access to why this awful thing happens, but it's happening, and it turns into a big fight that happens over and over. So if we want to go to what de-escalation looks like, and to your point a second ago, work backwards, when a couple has a cycle, like we all have a cycle. When people come into therapy, the cycle does have them.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not even understand the mechanics of the cycle,
Right.
which, knowledge is power. Right?
Yeah.
If you understand it, you can talk about it. And if you can talk about it, you can find a way through it. And so we privilege attachment, of course, and we're going to help people privilege their relationship before solving the problem. So if people can begin to identify the cycle as it's happening, as they're literally in a really tough spot, say, hey, this is a thing we do in Michael's office. Let's slow this down. I know I said something to you, it didn't land well because I can see you shutting down. I don't want that to be the case. And they take the fruits of what they've been getting from therapy and what they know about their partner's internal experience. They also know something about their move in the dance or their step in the cycle. Oh, I did that move again, and I know it impacts you in a certain way. And so they begin to have conversations that are essentially saying in a meta way, I see that I did this thing that dinged you, and I care about that. And I want to understand more what's happening for you right now. And I want to privilege this moment for us to be connected. And then we can finish like whatever we were trying to solve. We get back to the issue of remodeling a house or parenting or what are we having for dinner or peeling the potatoes, right?
Exactly, right?
Yeah, but we help people get there. So how do we get there? And that's the tango. The tango will take us through that. So in the early days, the way the tango was delineated, I think for all of us, it was kind of confusing because it was very general. So the first move of the tango was essentially reflecting present process. A gajillion models say reflect present process. It's really important to a lot of different models of psychotherapy. The piece that I think that was missing from that is we have an a priori understanding that we are reflecting present process as it pertains to knowing that there is a system that's getting activated, right? We're bringing that in. We know there's a cycle. That's why I said in that Burning Man diagram, we see the distress and we know we hope, but in vast majority of cases, there is still existing some attachment longing, those little kids. But we also know there's a dynamic and we want to pull that forward experientially. So what we do is based on how we understand emotion is organized. It begins somewhere with a cue. That cue that's based on a partner's action tendency, their reaction, has immense personal meaning when it's your significant other and you feel dinged or stung by it. We want to bring that to life. And that's really one of the places that the therapist will really roll up their sleeves ultimately. But we want to kind of bring that to life very lightly in the first move of the tango. What happens when you all start to kind of tip off balance? Well, there's a moment when he raises his voice to me. Okay, I've got a cue. And I might say something like, well, what does that say to you? Something so simple as that. Well, it says I must not really matter. It says that he doesn't really care the way he relates to me. I don't matter in the scheme of things. So once again, he's upset. Again, you put that in the context of significant others. That's a real
Right.
And so we help expand that with maybe a couple sentences. And we say, when that's happening, can I ask you what that feels like? What's that like to walk in your shoes? It really hurts my feelings, actually. It makes me feel very small. And what we're aware of is, even though we're kind of going at this lightly, we're not doing a deep dive, we're just trying to understand the scaffolding of the system. We're looking for the system, we're bringing it forward. We know that those waters run deep. And so we might say, when you start to hurt that way and feel small, how do you interact with your partner? And right now we have the entire arc of emotional experience, but we haven't done a deep dive. We're not doing anything with it. We're just creating a scaffolding. It starts when my partner raises a voice. It begins to bring up part of this narrative that I must not matter. In the scheme of things, I'm not very important to this person who's so important to me. It brings up hurt, which this never gets talked about. I just kind of fight back in that moment. And the move I do is to fight back. But the distress I'm in really never makes it to the light of day. And then we would go to the other partner and say, so when your partner fights back in that moment, is that on your radar? Well, of course it is. You think I raise my voice? You ought to hear him raise his voice.
Right.
What does that say to you? And so it's kind of like cycle light. We're just getting a scaffolding, but we're starting from a perspective that people are caught in a self-reinforcing pattern that is hijacking.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that's really important to name there, and I like the way that we're talking about this. I like the word cycle light. Just getting that really high view of what's going on when we talk about reflecting present process. And I'll just name that this is part of the training our ears to listen for that. And so because there is a lot of present process that we could reflect, right? And in fact, if you spend your whole first part of your session reflecting every bit of present process, you won't have time to get out of move one. You're going to be there for a while. They're going to give you so much, right, to reflect. And so there is a learning curve here around tuning our ear to attachment, right? And really listening into what are the parts of what they're sharing with me that hold this relationship in distress.
That's right.
And then reflecting that as part of this cycle that comes in and takes over the relationship, and getting a sense for the way that organizes one person and getting a sense for the way that organizes somebody else as well.
That's right. And to zoom out just a little bit to see how the whole system is organized, right? The relationship is comprised of the people in it. And we're hearing all of the moving parts that are based on emotional experience, and we're bringing them forward. So when we say we're reflecting present process, we're doing it through the lens of, we know there's a dynamic. The system is being hijacked by a dynamic that they both create, right? So we're bringing that forward, and we know the dynamic is based upon and activated through attachment-oriented emotion. So I like what you're saying here. We're really listening for those moments. I remember in my early training, Gail Palmer was my mentor, and she said, we listen with an ear for what hurts relationally. We're listening for the ear for what hurts. And that's really important. So now we have kind of the scaffolding of the dynamic, and we're going in there with beginner's mind. We're not trying to solve anything, but we're really curious, like, what comprises this dynamic? Because this dynamic gains enough momentum to take this particular relationship really off balance and put people who love each other into incredible distress. So there's something really potent in this, and we're just starting to get the overarching sense of what comprises it, what are the components. So that's move one.
That's all move one.
Comment I would say about move one would be, in the very beginning of therapy, move one is much more elaborate, but I find going from session to session through the course of therapy, I spend much less time there. I might check in. How's it going? How are you all seeing the relationship? And the only time I think I do a more elaborate focus on move one in stage one is when people come in and there has been a big conflict or crisis, and they need to kind of, again, go through the scaffolding for this particular, conflict du jour, if you will,
That's right.
and help me understand it. They both need to feel very heard.
That's right.
And so we'll redelineate it, but don't put the kind of time and attention to move one moving forward, because we have the
Right.
basics,
And
right?
and I would say even, like, when my rapport is really good,
When
like,
your alliance
when
is
my
good.
rapport is really solid and I know they have a really good sense of the dynamic, they really do see it. And yeah, I would also say at some point, right? And again, there's nuances, right? As always, right? When you start adding trauma as a lens, you're going to spend longer time in move one and each.
That's right.
Again, it all becomes this foundational piece isn't saying once you've done this a number of times, you can stop. It's still tailored to each couple. But I would agree. So once we have a really good sense that each partner feels understood, they're starting to hear the narrative that there's this way in which we're interacting with each other, that both of us are taking party in this distressing experience for our relationship. We're going to turn our attention into our move two. And so I've always enjoyed that we throw our stake down, right? We really choosing where we're going to do our work in this moment. And we've got to choose. And I really want to make this clear. In stage one, we can go with either side.
Right.
And we can go anywhere we want here, one partner or the other. It doesn't matter, pursuer or withdrawer. There's some clinical decision points you might make in the moment of a particular session, but process-wise, we can choose either side.
Exactly. And, to again zoom out, the cycle is a comprehensive whole, right? Like people say chicken or egg, it doesn't matter. We're bringing the cycle alive. We're helping people experience the problem as a cycle. And it's not like it has to begin with a withdrawer or pursuer, because there's this comprehensive dynamic that we're bringing forward. So my tendency would be, once I've delineated in a very light way the scaffolding of the system in move one, I usually try to put my stake in the ground, as you were just saying, toward the person I feel the most emotional resonance with. If
Yeah.
I feel more valence emotionally, I will move toward that person. And what I will start doing then is exploring in greater depth people's emotional experience. And in my opinion, this is really the heart of the work that we do in EFT. This is where we roll up our sleeves and we get in the trenches with people, and we really endeavor to bring alive that awful narrative, the meaning of the cue, the meaning of their partner's action tendency. When my significant other of all people in the world reacts to me in this awful way, holy cow, is that impactful, right? What does that bring alive? And so we're choosing one person initially and just joining with them in that, and helping elicit and evoke and expand, sometimes for the first time, the actual narrative. What is the meaning of that? Because we know the meaning is so impactful, right?
Mhm.
And so we help people basically, through doing that, organize their emotional experience. We know it starts with a cue. We know it has this intensely rich and often really distressing meaning. That's the narrative. And or we could call it, we're bringing forward cognitive appraisals. And each cognitive appraisal does its part in comprising kind of like the tapestry of the narrative that unfolds inside of people. And as we help people and we lean in with our empathy and our care and our curiosity, and they can feel us co-burdening that moment so they can more safely explore it, people start to feel the words in that narrative. They start to feel the reality. And it's not maybe the perceived hostility you see on the surface. We see the vulnerability, and we see the pain, and we see the fear. We see core emotions start to arise. And what we start to really do is lean in and help people start to really engage with that, which means just feel it. So they're feeling it in vivo, and how that will prime a reactive step. When you feel all of this, how do you interact with your partner? Well, this is where I yell. This is that moment, right? Because it's
Right.
unbearable to think that I can't get through to the person I love the most. So we are bringing that alive in move two. So we're doing two things, which we will talk about in much greater depth. But we are organizing emotional experience. We're showing how it starts somewhere. There's a profound narrative that comes up that we're helping people discover and distill as they're kind of coming to terms with the meaning of that moment. We use our EFT interventions to help them feel the potency of that narrative and those words. And then we ultimately, and that's what we call engaging emotion, we connect that engaged, alive emotion in the room to the way it drives a behavioral move in the dance. And now we have it organized from where it started to the reaction that happens on the end. right?
Yeah.
So that would be move 2.
Yeah, and I like that. Like you were saying earlier in this one and also in the last episode, how in this cycle, the way that we understand it is we know that there's a very vulnerable narrative running. But in this stance, when in their relationship, when they're in the kitchen and someone's just burnt the chicken, they don't have access to the vulnerable narrative that starts running, right? And yeah, that's a fight
All it
that
takes.
that's just the fight that recently came up in my office. I
Love
set the timer. No, you didn't tell me. I mean, it's the whole thing, right? But
all it takes.
the process that we're looking for in this move too is to slow it down enough that they can begin to get in contact with, name that vulnerable narrative and bring it forward. And one of the ways that I like to talk about this with my couples is I'll say, often life happens like a movie reel. It's moving fast, right? But if you really stop a movie reel and look at it, it's a collection of stills.
Mm.
Right. And so what I want to invite us to do, and I'll say this to my couples, I want to invite us to do is I want to take a second. Can we stop the reel for a moment? And can we start to look at this as an individual slide and catch the moments that are happening between these really protective and reactive parts of you so I can begin to understand what's happening in between.
That's
Right.
exactly. That's
And
nice.
this is where in move 2, we stop the reel and we start looking at it slide by slide so that we can begin to understand and bring forward the narrative that's happening that isn't often seen and that you can only see if you can walk through it a little bit slower or a lot of bit slower
Yeah.
and allow it the space and time to come forward.
And that's really lovely the way you're saying that. Exactly. And oftentimes, our way of joining each client is so unique. Certainly, the cycle prevents any kind of engagement in any kind of sense of feeling held and interested in. For some people, it may be the very first time that somebody's come alongside them to get curious about what happens internally for
Mhm.
these moments.
Yeah.
And that can be a long process. Sometimes people don't have the language for their kind of interior terrain. So there's a
Mhm.
really beautiful process of co-regulation and co-burdening, bring our empathy forward with this curiosity, eliciting these stories. When people don't have to be alone in it, it allows them more of a likelihood of actually feeling the story, not just
Mhm.
discovering it. So we're in this incredible discovery process where people start to feel the pain and the distress or the grief of that moment, maybe for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And if they haven't felt it and understood it before, there's no way they could have possibly talked to their partner about it. I
No.
mean, by design there, right?
It needs it
Yeah, it's
needs
about taking a
space
moment.
and time to breathe in that
Right.
safe
That's right.
environment to come forward. So let's keep going here. So
Okay.
we spend some time, we slow it down, we really help bring that narrative forward in move 2. And then that's enough, right? They now know it. No,
Yeah,
we've got
exactly. Well, our work here is
it.
done. Michael, great to see you. I think we're done here. Right. So
Yeah,
they know it, but it's like they don't just know it in their head.
that's
Now
right.
they know it in their bones.
Yeah, it's
Right.
reverberating in their body now.
Yeah. When we say we're helping people engage emotion, and one thing I really want to dispel is there's this old kind of rule in EFT that we don't go deep in stage 1.
Oh, yeah.
But we do. And one of the things I think is so significant about that is when you hold people deeply in the distress that is driving their action tendency, the action tendency now is so much more compelling, meaning you understand so much more clearly the deep degree of distress that would be happening in the
Mhm.
cycle and why someone would have to do that desperate move that some part of them, if they don't know before, they certainly get very quickly as we're working with them. That is the thing that pushes their partner away, but they keep doing it
Mhm.
anyway. But when you really get a sense of the deep amount of distress, so I just encourage people to stay attuned, and if it
Mhm.
goes deep, it goes deep, and sometimes it's very deep.
Very deep.
So what we do at this point is now we unisolate it in the relationship. And rather than us having done this lovely work, we're helping people understand the meaning of that cue in great detail and then feeling the pain of that narrative and the meaning. Now we help them turn, and rather than kind of expressing themselves indirectly through an attachment strategy, their step in the dance, which is really confusing. It sends very confusing signals to their partner because it basically creates a threat signal. Instead, we help people express themselves from that much more vulnerable core emotional experience. And so they will turn and they will lean in and say, when that moment that you kind of raise your voice at me, I am sunk.
Mhm.
I went through so much of that in my life, and to feel that's happening with the person I love the most, it's unbearable, and I'm in so much pain because I can't tell if you still love me, or something like that. And I like to think of this moment as like a picture speaking 1,000 words. If you were to read a transcript of that moment and you and I, or we were talking in this kind of tone that you and I are talking in now,
Mhm.
it would be interesting, but it wouldn't be something that could create change in the dynamic. But when people are really engaged emotionally and there are tears running down somebody's cheeks and their voice is cracking and their chin is starting to rattle, that moment, that limbic to limbic expression that's happening as they
Mm.
pass that, because sometimes people say, well, they just heard you say that. I just said it to you. They heard me.
Yeah.
But
I just told you. They
yeah,
heard me. Yeah.
right. So we
No,
have to
no, no, no.
actually look at each other and make contact in that way. And that limbic to limbic moment really shares a truth that words
Mhm.
alone can't. I remember Sue saying, there is nothing like that emotional moment to convey desire, empathy, longing, right? There's nothing that can, period.
Right.
So we're also banking on that moment, changing the interaction possibilities, right? If I'm coming from a vulnerable place, you're going to be much more likely to be interested in what I'm saying, not put on your heels by my attack, or not
Mhm.
feeling so harmed by my shutdown, and be responsive to me.
Mm.
So we have people actually turn to their partner, and so they hold that moment together.
Yes. And that is move 3.
That's
Like,
move 3.
when we say, "Can you turn to your partner? Can you share the vulnerable narrative?"
Yeah.
And that turn, it's everything, right?
Yeah.
That is the big one, because they are turning in the distress and from the distress, rather than in the distress from their protection, but in the distress and from the distress of what's really distressing to me here
That's
is
right.
this.
And we get to kind of really help illuminate that hurting human being that's behind the action tendency that their
That's
partner
right.
never gets to see.
Yeah.
So it's a really powerful moment. It's a
Yeah.
really beautiful moment and an essential one in
And
terms of changing the dynamic in the relationship.
yeah, and I think that's also worth noting here is that, particularly in stage 1, the way the tango is used is to organize the distress in terms of that action tendency and to keep turning back to the action tendency. This is the moment when you would do this, when all of this distress is running in your body. But that's very different than what we do in stage 2, because what we're talking about in stage 1 is everything is in service of de-escalation.
That's
So it's
right.
in service of organizing the cycle and laying it out in plain terms that in this dance, your distress hits. These are the alarm bells going off. And that's when you turn and start yelling. That's when you go away. We really want to make that really clear, that everything in stage 1, no matter how deep it gets, because working models, people mention working models in stage 1 all the time. They come up because it's part of people's meaning makers. But all the time, we are turning it back to that action tendency rather than diving into it. We're just turning it back to the action tendency. That's the awful message you hear. And then we start yelling and then we pull away. Right. So that's a big piece in stage 1. That is such a difference between that and stage 2, is it everything is in service of the
Everything's
cycle.
a service, right? Where we are bringing that cycle, we were bringing the problem, quote unquote, the problem of the system alive. That
That's
is
right.
our goal. That is our purpose. And that's what we're using emotional process for.
That's right.
We're showing.
So we're getting that direct expression.
Mhm.
That's the moment we're giving them a new step in the dance, right? I think about going and doing salsa dancing with my wife, took salsa dancing with her for a while. I was terrible at it, but I grew up swing dancing. And it's really difficult to change after doing one model of dancing for a long time. And so the teacher would kept coming over and she would stop me and she would give me like, no, it's this. But we need that. And when we're changing this dance, we're going to find that that's difficult. But this is the moment we're giving them a new step. We're changing that dance. And then we've got to do something with that. Someone's just taken the vulnerable risk. And so now we have to move forward of the tango.
That's right. I feel like it's completing the circuit. So we've followed that stake in the ground. We've brought alive somebody's internal emotional experience, meaning we've organized it. We've helped people feel the reality of it. Now, once they're in that vulnerable state and they're really heightened or engaged, whatever we want to call that, and it's clearly organized, we help them lean in and they share with their partner. Now, when people take a risk like that, part of them is wondering how their partner is receiving this, right? And so their partner's response is hugely important. Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Don't
we,
save your enactment for the last 50, like for the
yeah,
90th yard. Like, don't save the enactment for that moment, right? Because
uh,
this is such an important part. We've
so
got to get a
important.
response here.
Right. Again, it's relational. It's not just about getting into one person's pain. So
Hmm.
we have them lean in with it. And really, when we go into move forward, we stay focused on the process rather than the content of what the person shared, although the content can be very important. But we might say, can you see your partner being very vulnerable right now? Rather than kind of coming out of the gates, kind of gritting their teeth or saying something bitter.
Right.
Right now, they feel
Highlighting the new step in that dance.
that's right.
Like really putting the spotlight on the fact that your partner just did something different, something
That's right.
new.
That's
Yeah.
right. And so we're bringing their attention to that in a very deliberate way. And we ask them what that means or says to them that their partner is showing up vulnerability here rather than, slinging an arrow. And
That's right.
people tend to say really profound things when you ask them what the meaning of that moment is and you put it in contrast with the actual action tendency that usually happens. And so once we help people kind of shape that a little bit, the recipient of the initial enactment, we have them enact that back to their partner. Can you just tell them what that means to you? And it's usually such a beautiful, tender moment. And then we can ask the person who sent the initial enactment, what is that like to hear? And they usually respond in a really profound way. It's really quite lovely. So that's really what we're processing this new step in the dance. We're trying to bring the system alive, and in vivo, we're beginning to try to change the system. And we're bringing people into doing so through engaging with their own internal emotional experience. It usually happens in conflict.
I think you've named this moment, this 3 into 4 moment, and you're saying we can kind of go back and forth a little bit. You've used the phrase mining the moment. Is that right? Like really, really squeezing every bit of juice because someone's just done something new and different.
Yeah.
And you want to get that meaningful response back to them. And then you want to help them embody the experience of being responded to. Because when someone takes a new step in the dance and you invite their partner to respond, you're also inviting their partner to also take a new step with them.
Yeah, to join them.
And then really helping them embody, like, what is that like when your partner takes a new step with you in return?
Exactly.
And really helping that sink in. And you've said that this is a move that's really important because this is what helps people take it home, is
This
really
is
giving
what it
that
interact-
embodied.
Right. It makes it about the relationship at this point, right? It's
That's
not
right.
just kind of doing a deep dive into one person's emotional experience, but it's a specific emotional experience that is the thing that drives the reaction. And in this case, we help them go to the exact same emotional experience, but now we've helped them make meaning of it, feel the tenderness underneath it, and then bring that to their partner. And so the very same emotional experience tends to create disconnection. We have just facilitated something through using the tango where it creates connection. And as important as we may be in each person's process, their significant other is infinitely more important to them. So when that person
That's
says,
right.
boy, that meant so much to me that you would show me that side of yourself, and I'm feeling so much closer to you, and it gives me so much more hope that we can find a way through this together. And then they tell their partner who did the enactment that is kind of like a treasure at the end of the rainbow right there. It's an amazing thing. So it's this really beautiful interactive moment. If we could bump this into move 5 here, I could
Yes,
circle back
please
to
do.
where we just started. And that is the couple in the kitchen saying, you burnt the chicken. Right? And, help me understand, why you all are here. Well, talked about cooking the chicken, and next thing we're fighting like crazy, but we
Yeah.
don't know why.
That's right.
These really lovely moments feel really good, but often people don't know why. And so what we do is we offer kind of a very structured narrative. Now we're zooming out and we're saying, look what just happened here. You did something that is probably so counterintuitive. You began talking about this moment of reaction that often happens when the cycle grabs you. And to your credit, you stayed there and you turned your awareness inward and you began kind of exploring internally what the meaning of that was and what you go through in a brand new way. And again, to your credit, you brought forward the courage to let yourself feel the intensity of that. And that was no easy feat. And more importantly, you turned to your partner and you just shared with your partner openly. And it pulled your partner to you rather than that moment when you typically shut down and it pushes your partner away. And it looked like the two of you took a moment that normally creates disconnection, and you found a way through doing something different to feel connected. And what we've done is, in a very indirect way, is offered a playbook. Here are ways of creating connection in these moments where there's emotional distress with your partner.
Right.
And we do that over and over with repetition every time we complete a tango. So people begin to integrate it and internalize it. And over time, over revisiting that session to session to session to session, people begin to be able to bring that home. That's where that starts to translate into something user-friendly that they can do to get out from under the cycle and exit it And this is what starts to make kind of the difference between the cycle having the couple and the couple having the cycle. If they can keep getting out from under it and exiting it, they have a cycle like we all do.
Right. That's really important because you're helping us. One, I think move 5, as you're naming it, is like, this is the EFT answer to when couples ask, well, how do we stop it? Right.
Yeah.
Move 5 is reflecting how you just did it. Right.
Yeah.
This is the how. This is the answer. This is the solution. Right. It's what you've just done. And so if, as couples ask, like, how do we stop this thing? I like to say, look, I'll get there. I'll get there at the end of our session today.
Yeah.
But let me just stay with you here. But move 5, I make that very explicit. Like, listen to what you've just done, right? And we repaint it so they can see the how. And each time we do that, it's like we're expanding their emotional tolerance. Like, how much weight can this relationship lift? And each time they come in, we're pushing it, right? And in time, they start to see the waves don't hit so hard.
Yeah.
Because they can lift more. They're handling more. Their relationship can tolerate a lot more. And when it can tolerate more, they have a few more spots along the way they can make a different choice.
Yeah.
And then we start seeing them make those different choices.
Right. No, it's really important here because now people are finding their way through these moments. And, one of the things I love the most is when people come in, begin checking in, and they say, we're seeing things going really, really in a different direction. And it wasn't for getting tested. We actually hit a couple dust-ups this week. We were able to find a way to talk through them. We're using the stuff we talk about here. And that is phenomenal, right? That's huge. That's what we all need to learn how to do. It sets the stage for like an ongoing, actively capable way of repairing moments that used to just send people totally different directions and despair, right? It's profound.
All right. So let me just recap a little bit here, and we're going to wrap this up. It's a little bit longer episode, but I think this is an important episode as we talk about stage 1. This is the bulk of our work. But I want to make some things really clear here is everything we're doing with the Tango is in service of understanding this cycle and what happens and expanding their awareness and expanding their emotional tolerance so they can begin to see this dance. Then they can begin to say, hey, we're noticing it in our relationship. We're seeing it more often, at least awareness of it. But we're also being able to start touching into the more vulnerable marriage underneath it. And then we're finding our way out of it. But as far as our therapeutic process, it's Tango 1 through 5 over and over and over. And it's the EFT therapists our trust in the process is really trusting that repeatedly going around the Tango is what's going to help expand this tolerance and help the couple move towards de-escalation over and over and over as we walk through each 5 steps of the Tango to the best of our ability in each session with a couple throughout stage 1. Yep.
Yeah, that's really well said.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, look, we hope this conversation has been helpful for you, and we hope this makes stage 1 and Tango a bit more clearer. We're going to cover stage 2 in the Tango in our next episode. And then we'll also be breaking down the moves and how we do these things more nuanced in upcoming episodes. So thank you once again for joining the Emotionally Focused Therapist. As always, such a delight to have you join us. Such a great privilege to be with you, Michael.
And with you, Michael. Thanks. This is really lovely. And I'm so excited for the opportunity to continue these conversations.
All right. Until next time.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Emotionally Focused Therapy Podcast. We hope this podcast is an encouragement for your EFT journey, bringing clarity and understanding of EFT to your work. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcast. To learn more about training with Michael Barnett, go to www.michaelbarnettlpc.com. To connect with Michael Preston as a supervisor, go to www.michaelprestonlpc.com. Tune in again next time to hear more of this great conversation.